Democrats are counting on next year's midterms to win back at least some control of Congress.
Yeah, I mean, let's start there in that Georgia race where Aaron is. So again, you're going from basically the far end.
Confident they can overcome Republicans' narrow majority and retake the House. Their path to victory in the Senate is much more complicated.
In November 2024, the Democratic Party suffered a painful defeat. Kamala Harris, the first woman and first woman of color to lead a major party ticket, fell short against Donald Trump's return to the White House. Now, as we stand in mid-2026, the shadow of 2028 already looms large. The invisible primary has begun. Who will be the Democratic nominee in November 2028? This isn't just a question of personalities, it's a referendum on the soul of the modern Democratic Party. Will it double down on its progressive wing, embrace experienced governors with proven crossover appeal, or seek a fresh face to rebuild trust with working-class voters? In this documentary, we dive deep the emerging field, the strategic crossroads facing Democrats, and the high stakes of a polarized America. Drawing on polling trends, political analysis, and historical lessons, we map out the most likely paths forward. Welcome to the battle for 2028. After the 2024 loss, Democrats found themselves in familiar territory. Soul-searching. The party that once dominated suburban moderates and held strong with working-class voters saw erosion in key demographics, particularly among Latino men, younger voters in some cohorts, and those prioritizing the economy and immigration. The 2026 midterms, now just months away, serve as the first major test. Historically, the president's party loses seats in midterms, but Democrats are positioning themselves to capitalize on any backlash against the Trump administration. Gains in the House or Senate could energize the party and shape the 2028 bench. Losses might accelerate calls for generational change. At the heart of the debate, how does the party rebuild a winning coalition in a country deeply divided by class, geography, and culture? The invisible primary, the early fight for donors, endorsements, media attention, and organizational strength is already underway. The American election system does not offer many options for the American people. You have two choices, Democrats and Republicans. Looking at the Democratic Party's performance over the last 30 years, the Democrats have had 4 victories and 4 defeats in this period. In 1996, Bill Clinton won the election with 49.2% of the vote. In the 2000 elections, Al Gore lost to George W. Bush. In 2004, John Kerry also lost to George W. Bush. After losing 2 consecutive presidential elections, the Democrats won 2 consecutive elections in 2008 and 2012 with Barack Obama. The year 2016 witnessed unprecedented scenes not only for the Democrats, but also for America. The Democratic candidate was Hillary Clinton, the wife of former President Bill Clinton. The Republican candidate, on the other hand, was a very extraordinary name, Donald Trump. It was even claimed that Trump was running in the Republican primaries solely for PR purposes. While most did not even think he would become the Republican presidential candidate, Trump became the 45th president of the United States. Of course, it was not only the Democrats who thought Trump could not become president. The media also saw Trump's chances of winning as extremely low. In fact, for the media, Trump was more of a figure to be ridiculed than a serious presidential candidate. After losing the 2016 election, the Democrats ran again against Donald Trump in 2020, but this time the winning Democratic candidate was Joe Biden. Donald Trump opposed these results and became part of unforgettable moments in American history. Although he did not accept defeat in 2020, Donald Trump ran as a candidate once again in 2024, and this time won the election very clearly with a supermajority. The Democratic candidate Kamala Harris was unable to make any impact against Trump in the election. Not only Harris, but the Democratic Party also performed very poorly in the 2024 elections. In the 435-seat House of Representatives, Democrats dominated for a long time but suffered a major loss in 1994. In 1995, Democrats regained the majority, but from 1995 to 2007, Republicans held the majority in the House. From 2007 to 2011, Democrats took back the majority, while from 2011 to 2019, Republicans regained dominance. In 2019, Democrats once again secured the majority and maintained it until 2023. In 2023, Republicans reclaimed the majority. Currently, Republicans hold the majority in the House of Representatives. The Republican victory in 1994 was a turning point in the House. Democrats made strong comebacks in the midterm elections of 2006 and 2018, but majorities have often been narrow and unstable. Democrats have won 4 out of the 8 elections held in the last 30 years. For most of this period, divided government prevailed. One party has struggled to control both the White House and both chambers of Congress. In recent times, elections in America are becoming increasingly polarized. Narrow margins and split-ticket voting are decreasing. Democrats continue their opposition to Republicans on nationwide issues. Operation Epic Fury against Iran has increased inflation and gas prices. Anti-Trump protests continue in America. Nevertheless, the likelihood of Democrats winning in 2028 is still not very strong. So, what is the problem with the Democrats? Although Democrats make statements against Trump and his team, they have not been able to identify a strong candidate to oppose the Republicans within their own ranks. Tensions within the party also persist. After the defeat in the 2024 presidential election, the Democratic Party entered a deep period of self-examination. Internal party tensions are becoming more apparent, especially ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. The main divisions are ideological, strategic, and tactical. There is a tension within the Democratic Party that remains the most chronic and powerful. Progressives and moderate centrists. Progressives want a more left-wing agenda, economic populism, social justice, climate emergency, and more aggressive opposition to Trump. Supporters of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are in this wing. In some primaries, left-wing candidates are showing strength, but they are seen as risky in swing regions during general elections. Moderate centrists argue that the party needs to shift toward the center. They say a more pragmatic approach to cultural issues, focusing on the economy and border security, is necessary to win back the working class, Latino men, and voters with economic concerns. Groups like the Blue Dog Coalition and New Democrat Coalition support this wing. Many moderates believe that a move too far to the left will lead to another defeat in 2028. The 2026 primaries are directly testing this conflict. In some areas, progressive candidates are challenging moderates, while in others, moderates are winning. The party largely lost the working class in 2024. Now, there is a debate over whether to adopt economic populism or a more centrist, responsible governance approach. Progressive candidates emphasize strong social programs and tax the rich, while moderate candidates stress fiscal discipline, inflation control, and practical solutions. Israel, Gaza, Iran, Syria, and other international crises are causing deep divisions within the party. Progressive candidates are more critical and focused on humanitarian aid, while moderate candidates tend to preserve traditional alliances. This tension is also reflected in the 2026 primaries. There is a demand for young, dynamic candidates against elderly leaders. The party brand is at historically low levels, and the perception of being establishment fuels internal debates. The results of the 2026 midterm elections will also shape the 2028 candidacy. Tensions within the Democratic Party are not new, but the 2024 defeat has intensified them. While the party tries to unite against Trump, it also faces the risk of shooting itself over identity, strategy, and ideology. Without winning back the working class and swing voters, a lasting recovery seems difficult. So who are the possible presidential candidates for the Democratic Party in 2028? The 2028 Democratic primaries have not officially started yet, but the invisible primary is already underway. Although Kamala Harris remains the most recognizable name, there is a wide pool of candidates due to internal party debates and the search triggered by the 2024 defeat. Let's take a closer look at these candidates. Kamala Harris is a former California senator and attorney general. She became Biden's vice president in 2020. In 2024, she was the Democratic presidential candidate and suffered a clear defeat. Harris, who is positioned in the center-left, sees strong support among black voters and the progressive base. However, criticisms about her 2024 performance, perception issues regarding the economy and border security, and some party members' desire for a new face highlight her weaknesses. One of the prominent Democratic candidates is Gavin Newsom. He has been a politician in California for a long time and is a former governor. He raised his national profile by clashing with Trump. He is supported by coastal elites and major donors. Charismatic, a sharp communicator, and media savvy. Looking at his weaknesses, high cost of living in California, homelessness, and progressive policies are open to national criticism. Some moderates see him as too California. He promises climate leadership, AI regulation, economic justice, and aggressive opposition to Trump. Recently, he has been shifting towards a more populist tone. Another candidate is Pete Buttigieg, the former mayor of South Bend, 2020 primary candidate, military veteran, and openly gay. Buttigieg, positioned on the center-left and known as a pragmatist, is popular among young and educated Democrats as well as moderates. He stands out as an exceptional communicator, intelligent, and well-prepared. However, he does have some weaknesses. His executive experience at the state level is limited. Some consider him too academic, and his approach to the working class is seen as insufficient. A politician trying to bridge Bernie Sanders' economic populism with Silicon Valley's tech world is Ro Khanna. He is a member of Congress representing California's Silicon Valley region. Khanna, a Yale Law graduate, served in the Department of Commerce during the Obama era. He has been a member of the House of Representatives since 2016. In both 2016 and 2020, he was one of the key supporters of the Bernie Sanders movement. He is part of the progressive wing within the Democratic Party, but often describes himself as a progressive capitalist. That is, does not completely reject the free market economy and supports technology and innovation. However, he advocates for more aggressive government intervention against wealth inequality. Khanna's strongest asset is his media relations. Unlike many other members of Congress, he is constantly featured on national television, appears on podcasts, and is active on digital platforms followed by young voters. He has promises leaning towards economic populism. Khanna, who proposes a technology reform, has also adopted an anti-war stance in foreign policy. He argued that Democrats should once again become the party of peace. This rhetoric resonates particularly well among young progressive voters. The charisma issue is probably Khanna's biggest problem. Many people criticize Khanna for being too intellectual, too academic, and not a speaker who excites the masses. His Silicon Valley connections occasionally raise the question among some left-wing voters. Is he truly a populist, or is he too close to the tech elites? Within the Democratic Party, he is both the most likely candidate and the most criticized figure. AOC is probably the most striking name because she has become not just a politician, but also a political brand within the Democratic Party. Born in 1989, she is a member of the New York House of Representatives. She gained national recognition in 2018 by defeating Joe Crowley, one of the top figures in the Democratic Party, in the primary election. She became one of the most prominent faces of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. AOC is one of the most left-leaning national figures in the Democratic Party. She stands out with her advocacy for universal health care, higher corporate taxes, climate investments, and strengthening workers' rights. What sets AOC apart from her rivals is her media power. Because AOC is effective on television, effective on social media, and effective in podcasts. While many Democratic politicians are still dependent on traditional media, AOC can reach millions directly. With extraordinary communication skills, AOC has a very high influence on young voters. One of the biggest problems of the Democratic Party is consistently getting young voters to the polls. AOC is one of the party's strongest names in this regard. Although many Democratic candidates are technically strong, they struggle to generate excitement. AOC, on the other hand, is a figure who can mobilize crowds. In this respect, she is seen as one of the names reminiscent of the Obama era. As a politician of the media age, AOC understands this world better than many of her rivals within the Democratic Party. However, AOC is not flawless. She also has many weaknesses. The issue of centrist voters may be AOC's biggest problem. Even if she appears strong in Democratic primaries, she may not have the same support among centrist voters in critical states like Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. For years, AOC has been one of the most targeted Democratic figures by Republican campaigns. Therefore, she is loved by those who like her and not loved by those who don't. This situation may create risks in the general elections. The fact that she has never had any executive experience before is also one of her drawbacks. AOC is highly recognizable, which allows her to establish a large donation network. However, with her style of discourse and promises, she may distance the Democratic Party from centrist voters. This also creates a more complex picture within the Democratic Party. If AOC adopts promises and a style of discourse that can persuade centrist voters, she could become even more prominent within the Democratic Party and may be the Democratic Party's presidential candidate in 2028. Of course, if AOC does these things, can AOC achieve this? How can Democrats really win? In the 2024 election, Donald Trump criticized the significant aid the U.S. provided to Ukraine during Russia's invasion of Ukraine and called for the U.S. to take on a mediator role instead of offering unconditional support to Ukraine. He argued that Biden and his team had involved the U.S. in endless wars and that the U.S. should no longer act as the world's policeman, should withdraw its troops from the Middle East, and only assist allies who pay the U.S. and maintain good relations. During the election period, Trump criticized Democrats for not prioritizing border security, advocated for continuing to build and strengthen the border wall, declared he would classify drug cartels as terrorist organizations, and promised to fight them harshly. He criticized the economy during Biden's term and claimed he would make America great again by bringing American troops scattered around the world back home, closing many U.S. bases, reducing expenditures, and spending this money for the American people. Trump and his team did not design their 2024 strategy solely to appeal to their own supporters. They conducted a serious campaign to win centrist votes. So how are swing votes won? Of course, by winning in swing states. Swing states are those where both parties have a chance to win in the elections and usually determine the outcome. These are the places where election campaigns allocate the most resources because other states generally lean toward one party. In the 2024 elections, the 7 most critical swing states were as follows: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. These states carried a total of 93 electoral votes and were the places that determined the fate of the election. Donald Trump dominated the election in 2024 by winning all 7 of these states. You cannot win elections in these states with far-left or far-right rhetoric. Any presidential candidate who wants to win in these states must adopt center-left or center-right positions. If Democratic candidates win in most of these states, they are very likely to win the election. For Democratic candidates, this is the most challenging part for figures like AOC. Since the operation carried out by the U.S. together with Israel against Iran, the American economy has started to suffer to a certain extent. Gas prices and inflation have started to rise. The economy is one of the most important issues in American elections. Being able to produce convincing policies on the economy for the American public is one of the strongest ways to win in swing states. What candidates promise in areas that resonate with both left-leaning and right-leaning voters, such as economic assistance for the working class and youth, border security and fighting crime, education, health, and agriculture, is of course very important. For Democrats to win in 2028, it first depends on the performances of the candidates within their own party. After the presidential candidate is determined, the performance they show both nationwide and in swing states will be the most significant factor in increasing the vote share for the presidential candidate. How many American voters they can bring to the polls and how many they can convince with their policies are among the crucial points for winning the election. But winning an election in America does not depend solely on the Democratic Party's candidate and their performance. The candidate that the Republicans put forward and their performance will also be very important. The vice presidential candidates of both parties will influence the election as much as the presidential candidates themselves. In 2024, when Trump was the presidential candidate, his choice of J.D. Vance as vice president seriously affected the election in favor of the Republicans. Democratic candidates must pay attention not only to their own performance, but also to the performance of their running mate.